The phone's blue light painted my face in the dark. Another email from marketing. Subject line, urgent. Everything was urgent. The city hummed outside my window, a low thrum that never stopped, a machine that never slept. I didn't care. The sound was just part of the air now, like the smell of damp concrete and garbage from the alley below. The day's exhaustion had settled deep in my bones, a heavy, gritty feeling. All I wanted was to turn on the TV and watch something stupid until my brain shut off. I dropped the phone onto the cushion beside me. The screen went dark. I reached for the remote on the coffee table. My hand met empty space. I patted the table, the metallic clink of my watch the only sound. Nothing. I leaned over, squinting. Not there. I pushed myself up with a groan. My back protested. I ran my hands down the sides of the sofa cushions, my fingers digging into the deep, dusty crevices. I found a pen, 2 quarters, and something sticky that was probably part of a candy bar from weeks ago. No remote. Shit. The word was a puff of air. I lifted the cushions one by one, tossing them onto the floor. More dust. An old receipt. I got on my hands and knees, my head level with the floor. The world became a landscape of furniture legs and dust bunnies. I swept my arm under the sofa, my fingers brushing against the cold wood floor. Nothing but more dust. My frustration began to curdle into a low, hot anger. It was a stupid piece of black plastic. It couldn't have just walked away. I flopped back onto the bare sofa, the springs creaking under my weight. Fine. I picked up my phone again. The screen's glare felt like a needle in my eye. Another urgent email had arrived. Tap, tap. The sound was so soft I almost missed it. It came from the front door. 2 distinct, gentle knocks, not the loud, impatient banging of a delivery driver. I stayed still, listening. The refrigerator in the kitchen kicked on, its hum filling the apartment. It was probably a neighbor, a package delivered to the wrong unit. I heaved myself off the sofa again, my joints aching. I didn't bother looking through the peephole. I twisted the deadbolt. A heavy back quote. Thunk back quote. I pulled the door open. The hallway was empty. The single, fly-spotted light fixture cast a weak yellow glow on the stained brown carpet. The air smelled of cheap disinfectant and someone's boiled cabbage dinner from 3 doors down. There was no one there. No footsteps retreating down the stairs. No sound of the elevator door sliding shut. I was about to close the door when I looked down. There, on my worn-out welcome mat, sat a small box. It was perfectly centered, wrapped in plain brown paper, the kind you get at a butcher shop, and tied with a simple piece of white string. There was no tag, no name, no writing of any kind. I scanned the hallway again. Left. Right. Nothing. Just the quiet, buzzing light and the closed doors of my neighbors. This was weird. A mistake, obviously. Somebody got the apartment number wrong. I bent down and picked it up. It was light. I shook it gently. Something soft shifted inside. For a moment, I considered leaving it, letting whoever it belonged to come back and find their mistake. But the thought of it just sitting out there felt strange. I stepped back inside, closing the door behind me. The deadbolt slid back into place with another solid backquote. Thunk backquote. I walked into the kitchen and placed the box on the counter, next to the sink with its single dirty coffee mug. I stared at it. A box from nowhere. From no one. I poked it with a finger. It was just a box. I dismissed it. A neighbor's friendly gesture, maybe? Welcome to the building? I'd lived here for 6 months. A bit late for a welcome gift. I shrugged, the motion feeling stiff in my shoulders. I left it there and went back to the living room, collapsing onto the sofa again. I couldn't settle. I couldn't focus on the glowing screen of my phone. My thumb hovered over the glass, not scrolling. My eyes kept lifting, drawn to the front door at the end of the short entryway. It was closed. The deadbolt was thrown. I knew it was. I saw myself do it. I heard it. And yet, a thin wire of apprehension was tightening in my chest. My own home suddenly felt unfamiliar. The shadows in the corners seemed deeper. The usual city noises felt distant, leaving the apartment suspended in a strange quiet. I couldn't stand it. I got up, the movement sharp, and walked to the door. My hand reached out, my fingers testing the deadbolt. It was solid. Unmoving. Locked. I leaned forward, pressing my eye against the cold metal of the peephole. The hallway appeared, distorted and curved at the edges. The same yellow light. The same stained carpet. The same oppressive stillness. Empty. Of course it was empty. What did I expect to see? Wahais Maabi. That's when I heard it. That quote. Click. That quote. It was a tiny sound, barely there, a sound so small it could have been the house settling, or the ice maker in the fridge. But it wasn't from the fridge, it wasn't from the walls, it came from behind me. From the kitchen. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't move. I kept my eye pressed to the peephole, as if the distorted view of the empty hall was some kind of anchor. My heart began to beat, a heavy, clumsy drum against my ribs. Someone was in the kitchen. The thought was immediate, illogical, and completely overpowering. I hadn't heard the door open. I had locked it. I had been sitting right there. Slowly, I pulled my head back from the door. I turned, my body rigid. The archway leading to the kitchen was a dark rectangle across the room. Nothing moved. I stood frozen in the entryway for what felt like a full minute, listening. The hum of the refrigerator. The faint, far-off wail of a siren. Nothing else. No breathing. No footsteps. I began to move. My feet were silent on the thin rug. I drifted toward the kitchen, my body low. My gaze was fixed on that dark opening. My mind was a blank slate of pure, animal focus. As I passed the counter that separated the small kitchen from the living area, my hand shot out, my fingers wrapping around the handle of a knife in the wooden block. It was a small one, for paring fruit. The steel was cold and solid in my sweating palm. The weight of it was both terrifying and comforting. I reached the wall next to the archway and pressed my back against it. My shoulder blades scraped against the textured paint. I held the knife up, the blade pointing forward, my knuckles white. My breathing was shallow, inaudible. I strained my ears, listening for the slightest sound from the other side of the wall. Silence. The refrigerator was the only sound, humming its mindless, mechanical song. He's waiting. He knows I'm here. I took a breath, held it. My chest burned. I counted in my head. 1. My muscles tensed, coiling like springs. 2. My grip on the knife tightened until my hand ached. 3. I burst from behind the wall, spinning into the kitchen, the knife held out in a shaking, defensive arc. Get out! The words came out as a strangled croak. The kitchen was empty. My eyes darted everywhere at once. The window over the sink was locked, the latch firmly in place. The small pantry door was closed. The floor was clear. The back door, the one leading to the rusted fire escape, was shut and bolted. I'd bolted it myself the day I moved in. Everything was exactly as it should be. The dirty coffee mug was still in the sink. The dish towel was still hanging on the oven door. Nothing was out of place. A wave of relief washed over me, so powerful it made my knees weak. I leaned against the counter, my head bowed, the knife still in my hand. Idiot. The word formed in my mind. I was just tired. Stressed. The weird delivery, the quiet of the apartment, it all got to me. I let out a long, shuddering breath, and placed the knife on the counter. The metal made a sharp clatter on the laminate surface. My gaze fell on the brown paper box. Something was wrong. The string was still tied around it, but the lid, the simple folded-over flap of cardboard, was no longer flush. It was lifted, just a fraction of an inch. A small, dark gap that hadn't been there before. I stared at it. My heart, which had just begun to slow, started its heavy, panicked rhythm again. I didn't touch that box. I had set it down and walked away. With a trembling hand, I reached out and lifted the lid completely. Inside, nestled in a piece of wax paper, was a small, round cake. It looked like one of those fancy sponge cakes from the bakery downtown, with a single shiny salted egg yolk pressed into its golden crown. But my attention wasn't on the cake itself. It was on what was missing. On the side facing me, a small section had been removed. It wasn't a messy chunk, torn away by hand. It was a clean, precise slice, as if carved out with a small fork. A single, neat portion. Eaten. My blood ran cold. A chill that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room started at the base of my spine and crept up my neck. I backed away from the counter, my eyes locked on the violated cake. My heel bumped against a cabinet. I didn't look away. Then I saw it. Right next to the brown paper box, on the clean, empty stretch of counter where there had been nothing moments before. My TV remote. It was sitting there, perfectly placed. The black plastic was stark against the white laminate. It was set down neatly, its edges aligned with the edge of the counter. As if it had been placed there for me to find. As if it were a gift. I stood there, my back pressed against the kitchen counter. The paring knife I had dropped clattered once more as my hands spasmed. My gaze was fixed on the remote control. The black plastic was a void against the white laminate. It was clean. No dust from under the sofa. Its buttons were small, dark eyes staring up at the fluorescent light. It sat next to the box. The box with the violated cake inside. I didn't pick it up, I didn't touch anything. I backed away slowly, one step at a time, my feet making no sound on the vinyl floor. My eyes moved from the remote to the box, to the bolted back door, to the locked window over the sink, then back to the remote. The geometry of the room was a trap. There was no way in. And yet, a gift, an offering, a piece of my life, taken and then returned. My back hit the living room wall. I slid along it, my hand trailing against the cool paint, until I was standing in front of the door. The front door. My hand rose, the fingers trembling, and tested the deadbolt. It was solid, unmoved. I looked through the peephole. The distorted yellow hallway remained, still, unchanged. I didn't sleep. I lay on my bed, the covers pulled up to my chin, and stared at the ceiling. The city outside produced its usual symphony of distant sirens, rumbling trucks, and the occasional shout from the street below. Sounds I had learned to ignore. Now, each one was a signal. Each noise was a footstep outside my door. The hum of the refrigerator was the breathing of a man standing in my kitchen. I listened for the click, the sound of a lid being lifted. I listened until the gray light of dawn began to seep through the blinds. When the sun was fully up, casting long stripes across my floor, I moved. My body was stiff. My head ached from a lack of sleep. I walked into the kitchen. The remote was still there. The box was still there. I didn't look inside it again. I picked up the box, my fingers touching only the brown paper. It felt light, insignificant. I carried it to the small metal door in the hallway wall, the garbage chute. I pulled the heavy handle. It opened with a groan of metal on metal, revealing a dark, stinking shaft. I dropped the box inside. I didn't hear it land, just the rush of air. I slammed the door shut. The sound was final, a heavy, satisfying clang. Then I went back to my kitchen, grabbed the remote, and put it on the TV stand where it belonged. My mind tried to build a wall. I was tired, exhausted from work. I had misplaced the remote. I fell asleep on the couch, dreamed the whole thing. The knock, the box, or a neighbor left it, and in my sleep-deprived state, I had wandered into the kitchen, opened it, eaten a piece, and left the remote on the counter. My own mind was playing tricks on me. That had to be it. I repeated it to myself as I showered, the water scalding hot on my skin. I repeated it as I got dressed for work. A trick of the mind. The day at the office was a blur of spreadsheets and meaningless conference calls. I kept my headphones on, listening to loud music, anything to fill the silence, anything to stop me from listening for small sounds. I drank 4 cups of coffee. The caffeine made my hands shake, but it kept the fog at bay. It kept the memory of the black remote on the white counter from solidifying in my head. When I got home that evening, the exhaustion had returned, a heavy cloak on my shoulders. I fumbled for my keys, my fingers clumsy. That's when I saw it. Tucked into the crack of the door, just above the handle. A small, folded piece of paper. Not an envelope. Just a piece of notebook paper, folded in half. My heart gave a single, hard thump against my ribs. I pulled it out. My hand was unsteady. I unfolded it. The handwriting was neat, feminine, written in blue ink. Sorry if I bothered you last night. I'm the new neighbor in 404. I left a small housewarming gift, but I think I had the wrong apartment. My apologies. Leah. Relief. It was a physical sensation, washing through me, making my knees feel weak. A new neighbor. Leah. In 404. The apartment at the end of the hall. It was a mistake. A simple, stupid mistake. The box wasn't for me. But the rest of it? The open box? The missing piece of cake? The remote? My overworked mind. The explanation was so simple, so logical, it made the fear I'd felt seem ridiculous. I had been on edge, and my brain had filled in the blanks with monsters. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I unlocked my door, stepped inside, and tossed my keys into the bowl on the small entryway table. I put the note from Leah on the counter, a tangible piece of proof that I wasn't losing my mind. The world clicked back into place. That evening I did what I had wanted to do the night before. I ordered a pizza. I sat on the sofa and watched a mindless action movie. The sound of explosions and gunfire filled the apartment. It was comforting. Normal. Halfway through the movie there was a knock on the door. Not the soft tap-tap from before. A solid, confident knock. I muted the TV. The sudden quiet felt loud. I got up from the sofa. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. A woman stood there. She was young, maybe late 20s. Her dark hair was pulled back from her face. She wore a simple gray sweater. In the distorted lens of the peephole, her face looked pale, her eyes large. She just stood there, waiting patiently. Leah. From 404. I opened the door. Hi, she said. Her smile was small, a little shy. Up close, she looked tired. There were faint, dark circles under her eyes. Sorry to bother you again. It's no problem, I said. My own voice sounded raspy. I cleared my throat. You're Leah? That's me. From 404. She gestured vaguely down the hall. I just wanted to apologize in person for the mix-up with the cake. Don't worry about it, I said, leaning against the doorframe. Simple mistake. The fear from the night before seemed like a distant dream, something that had happened to someone else. This woman, standing in front of me, was just a person. A neighbor. I just moved in 2 days ago, and my friend brought over a bunch of stuff from that bakery downtown. I had one too many, she said, with a little laugh. Figured I'd share the wealth, but I must have misread the number on the list the landlord gave me. The explanation was perfect. It was mundane. It was real. It happens, I said. I felt the tension in my shoulders release. Her eyes drifted past me, into my apartment. Nice place. You've kept it a lot neater than the last guy. Thanks. She looked back at me, her smile still in place. It didn't quite reach her eyes. She gave another small, airy laugh. Looks like you didn't like the egg yolk cake last night, though. Sorry, I didn't know they were an acquired taste. The air in my lungs turned to ice. My hand, which had been resting on the edge of the door, went rigid. The sounds of the movie, still playing silently on the TV screen behind me, vanished. The hum of the building vanished. The only thing in the world was her face, her pleasant smile, and the words she had just spoken. I had thrown the box in the chute. The building's central garbage disposal, leading to the incinerator in the basement. No one could have seen it. No one could have known. It was gone. My mouth was dry. I tried to speak, but the first sound was just a dry click in my throat. I swallowed. How? I started, my voice a whisper. How did you know that? The smile on Leah's face didn't fade. It collapsed. It was like watching a building get demolished. One moment it was there, a structure of civility and friendliness. The next, it was gone, leaving nothing behind but a flat, neutral surface. Her eyes, which had seemed large and tired, were now just observant. The warmth was gone. Oh, she said. Her voice was different. The friendly, slightly high-pitched tone was gone. This voice was level, monotone, completely devoid of inflection. I just guessed. She didn't wait for a response. She turned, her movements fluid and unhurried, and began to walk away down the hall. My brain screamed. I acted without a single conscious thought. I slammed the door shut. The wood shuddered in its frame. My hand fumbled with the deadbolt, throwing it home with a loud backquote, thunk backquote. I twisted the second lock on the knob. Then I scrambled back to the peephole, my eye pressed against the cold metal. The hallway was empty. It was impossible. The elevator was at the other end of the hall. The stairs were right next to it. Even if she had run, I would have heard her footsteps on the thin carpet. I would have seen a fleeting shadow. But there was nothing. Just the yellow light, the brown carpet, and the closed door of 404 at the far end of the hall. She had just vanished. I stayed there, my eye at the peephole, for a full minute. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs, a wild animal trapped in my chest. My breath came in short, sharp gasps. Finally, I pulled back. My back hit the door. I slid down, my legs giving out, until I was sitting on the floor in the small entryway. I wrapped my arms around my knees. I had to get a grip. I had to think. But there was nothing to think about. There was only what had happened. A woman who knew something she could not have known. A woman who disappeared from a locked hallway. My gaze fell to the floor in front of the door. Where she had been standing, On the hardwood floor of the entryway was a small puddle, just a few drops of liquid that had seeped from her shoes, maybe. But it wasn't water. It didn't bead up on the polished surface. It was dark. A dull, brownish black, the color of old oil. And it wasn't sitting on top of the wood. It was soaking into it, staining the grain, a small, permanent scar on the floor of my home. 7 days passed. The silence in my apartment became its own kind of sound, a low hum that vibrated just beneath the surface of the city's noise. I did not hear a tap at the door. I found no boxes outside my threshold. Leah did not reappear. The stain on the hardwood floor of my entryway remained. I had tried to clean it. I had used soap and hot water, scrubbing with a green scouring pad until my knuckles were raw and the floor's finish had been worn away to dull, raw wood. The dark blemish did not fade. It had soaked deep into the grain, a permanent, ugly mole on the floor of my home. It was the first thing I saw when I left, and the last thing I saw when I returned. A small, dark anchor holding me to the memory of that night. My mind, in an act of self-preservation, began to erect walls. I went to work. I stared at my computer screen. I drank coffee. I came home. I ate food I ordered online. The plastic bags left by a delivery driver who I never saw. I worked to convince myself. I had been stressed, running on no sleep. I had imagined the impossible parts. The vanishing act. Her words. The security guard must have let her in. She must have seen the discarded cake box in the main trash room before it was incinerated. It was a chain of unlikely, but possible, events. It had to be. The alternative was a crack in the foundation of the world. Each day that passed without incident was another brick in my wall of denial. By Saturday morning, a new feeling had taken root. Shame. It sat sour in my gut. I had slammed the door in a neighbor's face. A new neighbor who was probably just tired and a little awkward. A woman who had tried to be friendly. My over-caffeinated, sleep-deprived brain had twisted a simple mistake into something monstrous. I had been rude. I had acted like a child startled by a shadow. I had to fix it. I had to go to her, apologize for my behavior, and smooth it over. If I could do that, if I could have a normal, boring conversation with her, then the memory would lose its power. It would become just an embarrassing story. That was the goal. To make it boring. I stood up from my sofa. I walked to the door, my shoes stepping over the dark stain without stopping. I turned the deadbolt. The sound was a heavy backquote, thunk, backquote. I opened the door and stepped out into the 4th-floor hallway. The air was still and smelled faintly of old carpet and air freshener. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed, casting a uniform yellow glow. It was a plain, unremarkable space. I turned right, my footsteps soft on the brown runner. I walked with a purpose I did not feel. My apartment was 4B. Leah had said she was in 404. I passed the door to 401. A plain, unadorned slab of brown-painted wood. Next was 402. A faded welcome mat sat in front of it. Then came 403. The brass numbers were screwed into the wood just above the peephole. My eyes moved to the next door. My brain had already projected the next number in the sequence. But it wasn't there. The number on the next door was 405. I stopped. I looked at the door. 405. I looked back. 403. My head turned slowly, scanning the distance between the two doors. There was no gap, no unmarked door. Just the standard stretch of beige, textured wall connecting the frame of 403 to the frame of 405. I took a step back. I looked at the whole wall. 401, 402, 403, 405, 406. My gaze drifted to the other side of the hall. My own door, 4B. The lettered apartments were on this side. The numbered apartments were on that side. 401, 402, 403, 405, 406. There was no apartment 404. No, I whispered. The sound was small in the quiet hall. I walked the stretch of carpet again. My hand reached out, my fingers tracing the textured wallpaper between 403 and 405. It was solid wall, cool and rough under my fingertips. I pressed on it. Nothing. I knocked. A dull, solid thud. It was a wall. Just a wall. I went back to the door of 403 and then walked forward, counting my steps. 10 paces to 405. 10 normal paces. I walked back. 10 paces. My mind scrambled for an explanation. I misheard her. She said 401 or 403, but the note had said 404. The conviction in her voice. I'm Leah, from 404. My memory of it was sharp and clear. I turned and walked toward the elevator. My movements were stiff. I felt like a machine with a broken gear. I pressed the down button. The light came on. I did not want to be in the hallway anymore. The yellow light felt thick. The buzzing of the ballasts sounded like insects trapped in the ceiling. The lobby was a relief. It was bigger, more open. A couple of worn armchairs sat against one wall. A fake plant gathered dust in the corner. Behind a tall faux wood counter sat the security guard. His name was Sal. He was an old man, with a face like a worn leather shoe and thin gray hair combed over his scalp. He had worked here for as long as I had lived here, maybe longer. He was watching a small, portable television, the tinny sound of a game show filling his small space. He looked up as I approached, his eyes slow to focus on me. Hey, he said. Sal, I said. My own voice sounded strained. Quick question for you. Shoot. He kept one eye on his television. The 4th floor, I started. Is there a new tenant up there? Sal's eyes left the screen and met mine. He squinted. 4th floor? No. Haven't had a move-in on 4. In. Must be over a year now. Mrs. Gable and 406 passed. But her son just has the place locked up. Why? The air in my lungs felt cold. A woman. Her name is Leah. She said she was new. He shook his head slowly, definitively. Nope. No, Leah. I'd know. I have to sign for the movers. Check the freight elevator booking. Nobody knew on 4. I leaned forward on the counter. The Formica was cool under my hands. What about apartment 404? Sal looked at me. His expression was not one of confusion. It was flat. What about it? She said she was in 404. He gave a short, dry chuckle. It was not a sound of humor. It was a sound of dismissal. Son, there is no 404. Never has been. He gestured with his thumb to a large, framed diagram on the wall behind him. It was a fire safety floor plan of the building, yellowed with age. Look for yourself. Old building. Old owners were superstitious. Skips from 3 right to 5 on every floor. No 4s, no 13s. See? I followed his gesture. My eyes found the 4th floor section. A simple black and white layout. I saw the box for 401, 402, 403. Then a solid black line representing the wall. Then the box for 405. It was exactly as I had seen it upstairs. A fact set in architectural drawings and concrete. There is no apartment 404, Sal repeated. He seemed to take some small satisfaction in stating a simple, unchangeable fact. He turned back to his television. The game show host was laughing. I did not take the elevator back up. I took the stairs. The concrete stairwell was cold and echoed with my frantic footsteps. I pushed open the heavy fire door to my floor and ran. The hallway seemed longer now. The distance to my door, 4B, felt immense. My key scraped against the lock. My hand was shaking. I got it in, turned it, and threw the door open. I slammed it shut behind me, shooting the deadbolt home. The thunk was the only sound in the apartment. I stood with my back against the door, my chest heaving. My mind was a storm of noise. Number 404. No new tenant. No Leah. But the note. The note was real. I had held it. It was my proof. Proof that I wasn't making it all up. Proof that she existed, even if her apartment didn't. My small metal trash can was in the kitchen. I had thrown the note in there after she appeared at my door. I never emptied the kitchen trash until it was full. It had to be there. I rushed into the kitchen and grabbed the plastic bin. I turned it upside down, dumping the contents onto the vinyl floor. Coffee grounds, a used paper towel, an empty yogurt container, junk mail. I dropped to my knees, my hands sifting through the small pile of garbage. My fingers were slick with coffee residue. The smell of old food filled my nose. I found it. It was stuck to a damp paper towel. The small, folded piece of notebook paper. I pulled it free carefully. It was real. I unfolded it. The handwriting was still there. Neat. Feminine. Written in blue ink. Sorry if I bothered you last night. I'm the new neighbor in 404. I left a small housewarming gift, but I think I had the wrong apartment. My apologies. Leah. I held it in my trembling hand. A wave of something that was not relief washed over me. It was validation. A terrible, cold validation. I was not insane. I carried the note into the living room, where the light from the window was brighter. I held it up. I stared at the words. 404. The number was there. She wrote it. As my breathing began to steady, my eyes focused on the paper itself. I had been so focused on the words before, I had not truly looked at the object. It was not a clean, crisp piece of notebook paper. Its color was not white, but a dull, weak yellow, like a book left in the sun for years. The edges were soft, almost furry, not sharp. The corners where it had been folded were deeply creased and browned with age, the fibers of the paper threatening to break. This was not a piece of paper from a new notepad. This was old. Very old. My heart, which had just started to slow, began to hammer against my ribs again. A low, heavy beat. I turned the small piece of paper over in my hand. The back was not blank. There was writing on it. But it was not handwriting. It was the faint, gray text of a printed newspaper, the kind of print from an old machine. The note had been torn from a larger page. Most of the text was cut off, just fragments of words at the edges. But in the center of the scrap, a few lines were mostly intact. I held it closer to my face, my eyes straining to read the faded, blocky font. Investigation continues into the partial collapse of the West Wing Tower during construction 15 years ago. While most workers were accounted for, the body of one victim, Leah M. Thorne, has still not been recovered from the rubble of the fourth-floor framework. The paper felt brittle between my thumb and forefinger, a dead leaf. My apartment was silent, but my ears rang with the words I had just read. Leah M. Thorne, still not been recovered. Rubble of the fourth-floor framework. It was a story fragment, a fossil of a forgotten tragedy. It did not make sense. Nothing made sense. My mind tried to connect the dots. The woman at the door. The missing apartment. This old piece of newsprint, masquerading as a friendly note. The connections were impossible. Threads of smoke. My brain, scrabbling for a foundation in a world that was tilting, produced the most logical explanation. I was losing it. I had fabricated it all. Not just the conversation, but the physical evidence. In some fugue state, some sleep-deprived moment of psychosis, I had found this scrap of paper, God knows where, and written the note to myself. The memory of her voice, her face, the weight of the cake box in my hands. They were all phantoms generated by a tired, cracking mind. The stain on the floor was just a stain, my own clumsiness, a spilled coffee I'd forgotten. This new idea was not comforting. It was a different kind of terror. The world wasn't broken, I was. I spent the next hour on my laptop, the glow of the screen painting my face in the dark. I searched for construction accidents related to my building. I used its official name, the address, the developer's name. I tried different date ranges, going back 20 years. I found nothing. No articles about a quote, partial collapse. No mention of a West Wing Tower. No record of a Leah M. Thorne dying here. The internet was a blank wall. It was another point for the I'm going crazy theory. A detail so specific, yet so baseless, must have been invented by my own subconscious. The paper sat on the coffee table next to my laptop. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. It felt like the single most important object I owned. It was either proof of my sanity or the primary symptom of its unraveling. I needed to know. I needed to see. On my way home from work the next day, I bought a camera. a small black cube sold as a pet monitor. It had a wide-angle lens, night vision, and connected to a phone app. It felt foolish, a paranoid tic made real, but the need for an objective witness was overwhelming. I got back to my apartment, the dark stain on the floor greeting me like a familiar pet. I didn't look at it. I placed the camera on the top shelf of the bookcase in the living room. It had a clear, unobstructed view of the front door, the entryway, and most of the main living space, including the sofa. I downloaded the app, connected the camera to my Wi-Fi, and checked the live feed on my phone. A fisheye view of my own apartment stared back at me. It was mundane, perfect. I ate a sandwich standing over the kitchen sink. I didn't turn on the television. I didn't play music. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound. I sat on the sofa, the one place I would be visible to the camera for most of the night, and tried to read a book. The words swam on the page. I felt watched, but this time it was by my own design. It was a controlled experiment. I eventually drifted off, the book falling onto my chest, my head lolling against the arm of the sofa. My phone alarm woke me at dawn. My neck was stiff. My back ached. For a moment, I forgot about the camera. I was just a man who had fallen asleep on his couch. Then I remembered. I grabbed my phone from the coffee table, my fingers fumbling with the screen. I opened the app. The camera was still online. It had recorded all night, saving the footage to the cloud. I tapped on the timeline. I began to scrub through the hours of darkness. My own sleeping form on the sofa was a pale lump in the grainy, black and white night vision. I hit the fast-forward button, watching myself twitch and turn in sped-up motion. The clock in the corner of the screen raced from 1 a.m. to 2 a.m., then 3 a.m. Nothing. The door did not open. No figures appeared. The apartment remained still. A wave of relief so powerful it made me dizzy washed over me. I was just a tired, stressed-out man. There was no one coming into my apartment. The note, the woman, it was all a private nightmare. Embarrassing, but harmless. I was about to close the app, to get up and make coffee, and put this whole week behind me. But my thumb paused on the screen. I scrubbed back. More slowly this time. There was something. A flicker of movement I had missed in my haste. It wasn't me. It wasn't the door. It was a shadow. In the corner of the room, near the far wall, stood a tall floor lamp. It was unplugged. It never moved. But its shadow, thrown against the wall by the faint ambient light from the window, had. I watched the timestamp, 3:14 a.m. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the long, thin shadow of the lamppost began to contract. The change was subtle. It wasn't the passing of headlights from the street. It was a steady, unnatural shortening. I played it again. The light source in the room was fixed. The lamp was fixed. The shadow changed its length. It defied geometry. It defied physics. My breathing stopped. I kept my finger pressed to the screen, watching the recording. The shadow shrank. It condensed. It pulled itself down from a long, vertical line into a dark, squat shape on the floor near the baseboard. It looked like a pool of ink. Then, over the course of the next 5 minutes, it began to change shape again. It was no longer just a pool. The dark shape hunched, rounding itself into a form that my mind refused to name. A dark shape hunched on the floor, vaguely human in its posture. Crouched. Waiting. Then, just as slowly, it elongated again, stretching back up into the mundane, harmless shadow of the lamppost. By 3:25 a.m., it was over. The camera saw nothing. No person. No intruder. Only the impossible movement of a shadow cast by a stationary object while the light source remained constant. It was in the room with me. All night. Watching me sleep. The phone slipped from my hand and clattered onto the hardwood floor. I couldn't take my eyes off the corner of the room. The lamp stood there, innocent in the morning light. The wall was just a wall. But I had seen it. The recording was the objective witness I had asked for, and it had shown me something far worse than a simple intruder. My body began to shake. A low, animal sound escaped my throat. I stumbled back, away from the couch, away from the corner. My legs hit the coffee table and I fell onto it. Pain shot up my spine. My laptop was on the table. In a surge of rage and terror, I grabbed it and hurled it against the wall. It hit with a plastic crunch and fell to the floor in a mess of broken screen and twisted metal. "Fuck!" I screamed, the word tearing out of me. The television screen across the room flashed on. It wasn't a show. It was white noise. A loud, rushing hiss filled the apartment, 1,000 whispering voices at once. My heart hammered against my ribs, a painful, frantic beat. I stared at the screen, at the dancing black and white static. A voice cut through the hiss. It was not loud. It was soft, close, like someone whispering right next to my ear. The voice of a woman. The voice of Leah. "You still don't like my cake?" The sound was not coming from the television speakers. It was coming from everywhere. It was in the static, but it was also in the room, a layer of sound woven into the air itself. All the strength left my body, replaced by a cold liquid fear. No, 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 my eyes darted around the room. I was alone, I had to be. I let out another yell, a raw sound of pure panic. My eyes landed on a heavy armchair near the shattered laptop. I grabbed it by its wooden legs, my muscles straining. With a guttural roar, I heaved it. The chair flew across the room and smashed into the television. The screen imploded. A spiderweb of cracks erupted from the point of impact, followed by a shower of glass. The television went dark. The hissing sound of static stopped. But the voice did not. The whisper continued, now seeming to echo from the very corners of the room, from the ceiling and the floor. It was smoother now, clearer, without the static to hide behind. I just wanted to be a good neighbor. I clapped my hands over my ears, pressing until it hurt. I squeezed my eyes shut. I sank to my knees on the floor, surrounded by the debris of my own panic. I stayed there, curled into a ball, shaking, waiting for the voice to fade. Eventually, it did. The silence that returned was heavy, thick with the smell of ozone from the broken electronics. My shaking slowly subsided. I took my hands away from my ears. I opened my eyes. My gaze fell upon the wrecked television. The screen was a ruin of shattered black glass. Useless. Dead. But it wasn't completely dark. In the center of the cracked screen, an image was glowing faintly. It wasn't static. It was a picture. I crawled closer on my hands and knees, my bare skin scraping against tiny shards of glass. I squinted, trying to make sense of the faint light. The image was from above, a high angle, looking down. A wide shot, like the one from my own security camera. It showed the living room. It showed the overturned coffee table. It showed the broken laptop, and the armchair lying on its side. It showed me, a pathetic figure, kneeling on the floor. The image was live. Glass bit into the skin of my knees. Each tiny shard sent a sharp, clear message of pain to a brain that was already overloaded. I was kneeling in the wreckage of my living room, staring at my own image on a dead television screen. It wasn't a reflection. Reflections move when you move. I was frozen, but the man on the screen, the pathetic man kneeling in the glass, was breathing. I could see the slight tremor in his shoulders. It was a live feed. The camera was somewhere above me, and to the left. My head did not turn. My eyes did not lift from the screen. A single, cold thought cut through the panic. Get the phone. It had slipped from my hand, landing somewhere by the upturned coffee table. I pushed myself up, my palms flat on the floor, ignoring the new pricks of glass. I crawled. The movement was slow, deliberate, like a wounded animal. I found the phone. Its screen dark. I grabbed it. I had to get out. My legs were weak, shaking beneath me. I used the arm of the sofa to pull myself to my feet. My eyes were still locked on the broken television. The image was gone. The screen was black and fractured again, as if it had never been there. My thumb moved over my phone's screen, swiping through contacts. The name was a beacon. Dave. He would answer. He always answered. The phone rang twice. Hello? Dave. My voice was a dry rasp. Jesus, man, you okay? You sound like hell. I have to get out of my apartment. The words came out in a rush. There's someone here. Or something. I don't know. The TV, it was watching me. There was a pause on the other end. I could picture him, rubbing the back of his neck, the way he did when he was confused or skeptical. Watching you? What are you talking about? Did someone break in? No. It's not that simple. How could I explain a shadow that shrinks? A whisper from the static? A dead television that becomes a security monitor? The woman. The neighbor. The one I told you about. She's not real. But she's here. Okay, hey, slow down. His voice was level, the tone someone uses on a spooked horse. You're not making any sense. Look, just stay on the line with me. Are the doors locked? Yes, but it doesn't matter. Okay. Listen, you're stressed. You've been working too hard. I get it. But you need to ground yourself. Is there anything weird there? Anything you can see? Can you take a picture of it for me? Proof. Something I can look at. Proof. The word was an anchor. My mind latched onto it. An objective witness. That's what the camera was for. The camera had failed, showing me an impossibility instead of a truth I could act on. But a photo was different. A simple, still image. Evidence. Yeah, I said, my breathing evening out slightly. Okay. Proof. Good. Just take some pictures of whatever looks strange. The stain on the floor you were talking about. Whatever. Send them to me. I'm leaving work in a bit. I'll swing by and we'll figure it out. Okay. Just breathe, man. It's gonna be fine. He hung up. The apartment was quiet again, save for the hum of the refrigerator. Breathe. He was right. I needed to breathe. I took a deep, shuddering breath. I could do this. I could be rational. I could collect evidence. My phone felt heavy in my hand. A tool. I aimed its camera lens. First, the stain on the floor by the door. The puddle of muddy water from her offered cake was long gone, but it had left a faint brown outline on the hardwood. A cracked map of dried dirt. I crouched, holding the phone steady, framing the dissonant shape against the clean lines of the floorboards. The shutter made a soft, digital click. One picture. Second, the newspaper clipping. It was still on the coffee table, next to my wrecked laptop. Leah M. Thorne. I picked it up. The paper was thin, fragile. I held it up in the light from the window, making sure the text was readable. Click. 2 pictures. Third, the television. I stood back, capturing the whole scene of destruction. The overturned chair, the spiderweb of cracks in the dark screen, the glass on the floor. It looked like a common domestic dispute, a fit of rage. But I knew what it was. It was a reaction to a voice that had no source. It was a response to an image that should not exist. Click. 3 pictures. I went through the apartment, documenting every small thing that felt off. The unplugged floor lamp in the corner. Its shadow was perfectly normal now, a long, thin line against the wall in the afternoon light. It looked innocent. I took a picture anyway. Click. 4. The front door. I took a picture of the peephole from the inside, a dark circle in the wood. Click. 5. I felt a measure of control return. I had data. Tangible files. I opened my messaging app, found my chat with Dave, and attached the 5 images. The thumbnails appeared in the message bar, small squares of color and shape. The stain. The paper. The TV. The lamp. The door. I hit send. The progress bar filled. Sent. I stood in the middle of the room, my phone in my hand, and waited. I felt calmer. Dave would see the pictures. He would see that something was out of place. He would come over. I would not be alone in here. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was a call from Dave. That was fast. I answered, a wave of relief washing over me. Did you get them? Did I get them? His voice was not calm anymore. It was sharp, edged with irritation. Yeah, I got them. What the hell is this, a prank? I'm trying to help you out and you're screwing with me? The relief vanished, replaced by a cold confusion. What? A prank? What are you talking about? The pictures, man. What's with the pictures? You send me 5 black squares. Is your phone broken or something? Or do you think this is funny? My blood ran cold. Black squares? I pulled the phone away from my ear. I kept him on speaker but switched to my photo gallery. The most recent photos were at the top. It was a black rectangle. I swiped. Another one. I swiped again. And again. And again. 5 of them. 5 voids. There was no stain. No newspaper. No broken television. Just 5 identical perfect black squares, stripped of all data, all light, all proof. The phone had captured the images. I had seen them. And then the building, the room, had reached into the device and scrubbed them clean. It had eaten my evidence. I don't understand. I stammered into the phone. They were pictures. I saw them. Well, I'm looking at black rectangles, Dave snapped. Look, man, I think you need to get some sleep. You're freaking me out. I gotta go. No, Dave, wait. My phone buzzed again. A new notification covered the screen. Backquote incoming video call. Dave, backquote. Wait, you're video calling me now? I said, my voice thick with desperation. What? I'm not calling you, his voice said from the still active audio call. But the screen was insistent. His picture, his name, an invitation to connect, an override. The audio call cut off as the video call forced itself through. My thumb, acting on instinct, pressed the green button. I had to show him. I could turn the camera on the room and show him everything. His face did not appear. The screen showed a view of my own apartment. It was a jerky handheld perspective, as if someone were walking. It showed the far wall of the living room, then panned shakily past the shattered television. It was showing me my own home, live, but not from the phone in my hand. The angle was wrong. It was from the other side of the room. The video feed panned towards the short hallway that led to my bedroom and bathroom. It stopped. It focused on the bedroom door. It was ajar, just as I had left it. I stood frozen in the living room, watching a video of my own apartment, streamed from a device that was somewhere inside it with me. I lowered the phone slightly, my eyes lifting from the screen to the real bedroom door down the hall. They were identical. A door, cracked open, leading into darkness. Then, from the phone's tiny speaker, a sound. It was not Leah's whisper. It was a giggle. A light, airy, playful sound. The sound of a young woman who has just won a game. And the sound was not just coming from the phone. I heard it again, a faint echo of the first, drifting out from the dark gap of the bedroom doorway. Someone was in my bedroom, holding a phone, video calling me with it and laughing. A raw, animal noise tore itself from my throat. I threw the phone. It spun through the air and hit the far wall with a sharp crack, falling to the floor. I didn't wait to see if it was broken. I turned and ran. My body was pure instinct. There was no thought, only a primal command. Get out! I yanked the front door open, not bothering to lock it behind me, and sprinted into the building's hallway. The emergency exit was to the left. I slammed the metal bar and plunged into the concrete confines of the stairwell. My feet hammered down the steps. The sound echoed loud in the enclosed space. Down, down, down. My lungs burned. My legs screamed. I didn't care. The building felt alive around me, a concrete stomach contracting, and it was something it was trying to digest. I flew past the landing for the 5th floor. The 4th floor was next. As I descended, my head turned in a panicked, sideways glance, my gaze sweeping across the hallway visible through the stairwell window. It was a reflex, a desperate check for pursuit. The hallway was empty. Fluorescent lights hummed above a worn carpet. The doors were marked 403 and 405. The same blank stretch of wall was between them. No. My running faltered. I stumbled. Catching myself on the handrail, my momentum killed. It wasn't a blank wall. It was not a blank wall anymore. Set into the space between rooms 403 and 405 was a door. It was made of a dark wood, almost black, and it looked older than the rest of the building. The cheap, hollow core doors of the other apartments were painted a sterile white. This one was solid, imposing, its surface scarred with age. In the center of the door, at eye level, was a small, rectangular brass plate, tarnished and green with verdigris. Engraved on the plate were 2 simple characters, P.404. I didn't run from the building, I was ejected from it. One moment my feet were hammering on the concrete of the stairwell, the next I was tumbling out the ground floor fire exit into the harsh sunlight of the parking lot. The metal door slammed shut behind me with a boom that made me flinch. I lay on the hot asphalt for a second, chest heaving, the smell of tar and exhaust fumes filling my nose. I scrambled to my feet and ran, not looking back, my shadow stretching out long and fractured in front of me. Dave's apartment smelled of stale pizza and air freshener. He handed me a glass of water. My hand shook so badly the water sloshed over the rim, cold drops hitting my jeans. I put the glass down on his coffee table before I could drop it. Jesus, Alex. He stood a few feet away, arms folded, a deep crease of worry between his eyebrows. You look like you saw a ghost. I just shook my head. A ghost would have been simple. A ghost was something you could understand. The door, I said, the words feeling thick in my mouth. On the 4th floor. P.404. It wasn't there before. I've used those stairs a dozen times. It was a blank wall. Dave ran a hand through his hair. He was trying to be patient. I could see the effort it took. Okay, a door. So some new tenant moved in? Maybe they're renovating? No, you don't understand. I looked at him, trying to force the reality of it into him with my eyes. The video call. It came from your number. But it wasn't you. It was a camera inside my apartment, watching me. I was getting a live feed of my own bedroom door from inside my own home. He was quiet for a long time. He walked to his window and looked out at the city traffic below. Alex, he said, his back still to me. The wiring in that building is ancient. The whole grid downtown is a mess. Couldn't it be some kind of freak signal crossing? Some neighbor's baby monitor getting patched into your phone through the building's shitty Wi-Fi? And the giggling? The sound coming from my phone and my bedroom at the same time? Maybe you just thought you heard it from the bedroom, he offered, turning around. His expression was a careful mask of concern, but I could see the skepticism underneath. He thought I was breaking down. You were panicked. Your brain was playing tricks on you. My phone took 5 black pictures, Dave. 5 of them. I took pictures of evidence. It ate them. Or the camera malfunctioned. Or the lens was covered. He was running out of logical explanations, but he clung to them like a life raft. Look, you're safe here. Nothing can get to you here. Just breathe. We'll figure this out. But you can't stay here forever. Your wallet, your keys, your work laptop. It's all still in there. You have to go back. The idea sent a jolt of ice through my veins. No, I can't. I'll go with you, he said, his voice firm. Tomorrow. In the middle of the day. Broad daylight. We go in, we grab your essentials, and we get out. 5 minutes. Then you can find a new place. I'll even help you move. But we have to get your stuff. He was right. I couldn't just abandon my entire life because of a door and a video call. Trapped by the mundane necessities of modern survival. I needed my wallet. I needed my car keys. I needed my life back. Going back with Dave, in the bright light of a Tuesday afternoon, seemed manageable. The fear was a creature of the night, of isolation. It couldn't survive in the sun, with a witness. The lobby was bright and airy, just as it had always been. Sunlight streamed through the tall glass doors, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. A woman with a small dog passed us, smiling briefly. It was all so normal. My panic from the day before felt like a memory from a dream. Dave clapped a hand on my shoulder. See? It's just a building, man. We took the elevator. The ride up was quiet. I watched the floor numbers light up. 1, 2, 3, 4. My stomach tightened. 5. The doors slid open with a soft chime. We stepped out. The fluorescent light in the 5th floor corridor flickered. One of the long tubes was buzzing, casting a sick, yellow light over everything. The air was still. It felt heavier than it should. Damn, Dave muttered, looking down the hall. This place is a dump. You need to move. The hallway stretched before us. My door, 506, was somewhere down to the right. We started walking. The carpet was a faded, industrial gray, absorbing the sound of our footsteps. We passed 501 on our left. Then 502 on our right. Everything seemed as it should be. We passed the spot where 506 should have been. A door was there, but the numbers on it were 508. Wait, Dave said, stopping. He turned his head back the way we came. 506 should be right here. Did they renumber the apartments? We kept walking. The doors continued. 509. 510. 511. The numbers climbed higher and higher. A cold knot formed in my gut. This was wrong. This floor only went up to 512. At the far end by the fire exit. We passed 512. Then 513. Then 514. The hallway continued forward, a perfect, repeating pattern of white doors and brass numbers. What the hell? Dave's voice was a low whisper. His friendly confidence was gone. replaced by a sharp edge of confusion. This hall doesn't go this far. It just ends. He was right. I'd walked this path 100 times. It was a straight shot from the elevator to the stairwell at the far end. There were no turns. No other corridors. We stopped and turned around, looking back toward the elevator. The wall where the elevator doors had been was now a solid, unbroken stretch of beige plaster. There was no seam, no button, no frame. It was just a wall, as if the elevator had never existed. We turned the other way. The hallway stretched on in front of us, the doors marching into a hazy shadow that our eyes couldn't quite penetrate. Behind us, the same thing. A long tube of doors and flickering lights, with no beginning and no end. "Okay," Dave said, his voice trembling slightly. "Okay, this is not happening." He started walking quickly back the way we came, toward the spot where the elevator used to be. I followed, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. He ran his hands over the smooth, cool plaster of the wall. "No, no, no, no." He spun around, his face pale, his eyes wide. My own fear, which I had managed to suppress, surged back with a vengeance, amplified by seeing it reflected in his face. He was my anchor to the real world, and he was coming untethered. "It's the house," I breathed. "It's doing something." We were trapped. A sound from far down the corridor snapped our heads in that direction. It was a shape, detaching itself from the deep shadows at the far end of the hall. It was too far to see clearly, just a dark form against the dimmer darkness. But it was moving toward us. "Who's that?" Dave called out, his voice a mix of aggression and fear. "Hello?" The figure didn't answer. It just kept coming. It had the approximate size and shape of a person. A woman. As it moved into a patch of more reliable light, I saw the pale dress. My blood turned to ice water. It was her. Leah. But she wasn't walking. She was lurching, dragging herself forward. Her body moved in a way that was fundamentally broken. One leg would slide out, followed by the rest of her torso in a grotesque ripple. Her arms seemed to hang limp, then one would shoot out to brace against the floor, fingers splayed. With each movement, a sound echoed down the long hall. It was a wet, popping noise, a sound of dislocation, the sound of a joint being pulled from its socket, over and over again. A steady rhythm of pops and cracks, the sound of a body destroying itself to achieve motion. "What the fuck?" Dave breathed beside me. His face was a mask of disbelief and horror. The figure continued its broken crawl, closer now. We could see her head, hanging at an impossible angle, her long black hair sweeping the dirty carpet. Pop crack. Her shoulder seemed to stretch, her arm extending to an unnatural length as she pulled herself another foot closer. Pop crack. Her knee bent sideways, the wrong way, propelling her forward. That was enough for Dave. He let out a choked, raw cry, a sound of pure animal terror. He turned and bolted, running away from the approaching thing, deeper into the endless stretch of hallway. "Dave, no!" I screamed, but he was gone, his footsteps pounding on the carpet, fading into the distance. I was alone. I couldn't move. My feet were rooted to the floor. The thing, Leah, stopped its advance. It was maybe 40 feet away. Slowly, with a sound like grinding stones, her head lifted. Her neck was clearly broken, her head lolling back at an angle that would have severed a spinal cord. But her eyes found mine. They were wide and dark. Her mouth opened. It kept opening, wider than any human jaw should allow. The skin at the corners of her lips stretched thin, then tore with a soft, wet rip. It opened until her face was just a gaping, dark hole, and from that hole came a noise. It wasn't a whisper, it wasn't a scream. It was a high-frequency hiss, like compressed air tearing through a ruptured line, mixed with the sound of 1,000 cicadas. It was a sound that vibrated in my teeth and rattled my skull, a physical assault of noise that bypassed my ears and went straight for my brainstem. The sound broke my paralysis. An instinct older than thought screamed one word: run! I turned and fled, chasing the path Dave had taken. I ran blindly, my lungs burning, the hissing sound clawing at my back. I risked a glance over my shoulder. She was moving again, faster now. a writhing, snapping collection of limbs scuttling down the hall like a crippled insect. I pushed myself harder, my legs pumping, my sneakers slapping against the carpet. Up ahead, I heard Dave's voice. One sharp, terrified scream that was cut off abruptly. Then, silence. I didn't stop. I couldn't. I just kept running, my mind blank with terror. The hallway flew past me in a blur of white doors. 527, 528, 529. The numbers meant nothing. There was no end. I was going to run until she caught me or my heart exploded. My foot caught on something. I pitched forward, arms flailing, and hit the ground hard. The impact knocked the wind out of me. I landed on my hands and knees, my head spinning. I tasted blood in my mouth where I'd bitten my tongue. I pushed myself up, expecting to see her bearing down on me, to feel her broken fingers close around my ankle. I was on the floor in front of a door. The brass numbers on it were P506. My door. My breathing came in ragged, painful gasps. I looked up. The hallway was normal. It was exactly as it should be. The light was a steady, humming white. The air was still. I scrambled to my feet and looked back the way I had come. The elevator was there, its silver doors gleaming under the fluorescent lights. The hallway ended just beyond it. I looked the other way. The corridor stretched for another 30 feet and terminated at the red fire exit door. There was no endless hallway. There was no crawling woman. And there was no Dave. My phone. I needed my phone. My hand trembled as I jammed it into my pocket, fingers fumbling over the smooth glass. The screen lit up, a small island of order in the chaos of my mind. I found Dave's contact. My thumb hit the call button. It rang once, then went straight to voicemail. Dave's cheerful, recorded voice felt like a message from another lifetime. "Hey, you've reached Dave. Leave a message, you know the drill." The beep sounded loud in the quiet hall. "Dave?" My voice came out as a ragged croak. "Dave, where are you?" "It's gone. The hallway, it's back to normal. You just vanished. Call me." "Shit, just call me back." I hung up, stared at the phone. Called again. Straight to voicemail. Again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. A cold certainty began to settle in my stomach, heavier than the fear. He was gone. The thing in the hall, the building, it took him. I leaned against the cool plaster of the wall opposite my door, the wall where the elevator had been just moments ago, and slid down to the floor. My head was in my hands. What do you do? What do you do when your friend is erased from reality in front of your eyes? 911. The numbers seemed foreign on the keypad. I pressed them, a woman's voice, calm and detached. 911. What is your emergency? My friend? I started, the words tumbling out. My friend is missing. We were here, in my apartment building, and he's gone. Okay, sir, calm down. What is your location? I gave her the address, the floor, the apartment number. My apartment. P.506. She asked for my name, my friend's name. What were the circumstances of his disappearance, she asked. The question hung in the air. How could I answer that? We were walking down the hallway, I said, trying to keep my voice from shaking. And the hallway, it changed. It wouldn't end. And the elevator, it wasn't there anymore. There was a wall. And then we saw something. Someone. And he ran. He screamed and he ran, and then he was gone. A pause on the other end of the line, a long one. I could hear the faint click of a keyboard. Sir, she said, her tone shifting, it was the voice you use on a child or a madman. Are you or your friend under the influence of any narcotics? No. God, no, it happened. I saw it. Okay, sir. We're dispatching a unit to your location. Please remain where you are. She disconnected. I waited. Every second stretched. The hum of the lights above was the only sound. I didn't dare move. I just stared at the elevator doors, willing them to open and reveal Dave, laughing at some elaborate prank. They remained closed. 2 police officers arrived about 20 minutes later. One was older, with a weary-looking mustache and a gut that strained the buttons of his uniform. The other was younger, sharp-faced, his hand resting near his sidearm. You Alex Porter? The older one asked. I nodded, getting to my feet. You're the one who called about a changing hallway? He said the words slowly, as if tasting them for absurdity. I told them everything. I told them about the crawling woman, the endless corridor, Dave screaming and running away from me, and the sudden snap back to normal. As I spoke, I watched their faces. The younger cop's expression was a blank wall of professional neutrality. The older one just looked tired. He'd heard 1,000 crazy stories. Mine was just one more. "And your friend's name is Dave Miller," the older officer Hannon confirmed, looking at his notepad. "Yes, we came in together. We have to find him." "All right, let's start with the basics. We'll check the security cameras in the lobby." We rode the elevator down in a stiff silence. The trip felt normal, too normal. In the small, stuffy security office behind the front desk, the building manager, a scrawny man named Mr. Fitzwilliam, rewound the footage. The screen showed the lobby from a high corner angle. At 2:14 p.m., the glass doors opened. I walked in. Dave walked in right behind me. We stood at the elevator. We got in. "See?" I said, pointing at the screen. "That's us. We came in together." Haddon nodded. "Fitzwilliam, fast forward. See when they come back down." We watched the timestamp in the corner jump. 2:30, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. The lobby saw a quiet trickle of residents coming and going. At 4:22 p.m., the main door burst open. I stumbled out, falling onto the pavement outside. I looked terrified. I scrambled up and ran out of the frame. "Okay," Hannon said. "Where's your friend?" "Keep watching," I urged. Fitzwilliam let the tape run. Nothing happened for almost an hour. Then, at 5:17 p.m., the camera showed me walking back into the lobby. Alone. I got into the elevator. Alone. "That's it," Fitzwilliam said, turning in his chair. "That's everything up to right before you called us down." "No," I said, shaking my head. "No, he never came out. He's still in here." Hannon sighed, a long, tired exhalation. "Son, the camera shows you came in with your friend. Then you ran out. Alone. Then you came back in. Alone. Your friend never came back down. The simplest explanation is that he left while you were upstairs having whatever it was you were having. But he didn't. He was with me on the 5th floor. He ran down the hall." "Which hallway?" the young cop, Martinez, asked, speaking for the first time. "The one that goes on forever?" I stared at him. The contempt was subtle, but it was there. They thought I was insane. Or high. They thought Dave had just walked out on his crazy friend. "Look," Hannon said, putting his notepad away. "We'll file a missing persons report for your friend, Mr. Miller. We'll give his number a call. But from what we're seeing here, there's no evidence of a crime. There's no evidence he's even in the building. Frankly, Mr. Porter, it looks like you had a panic attack." He looked me up and down. "You have a history of this sort of thing." "No, this is real." "Right." He handed me a card. "If you remember anything else, or if your friend shows up, give me a call. In the meantime, get some rest, and stay off whatever it is you're taking." They left. Just like that. I was alone in the lobby, with Mr. Fitzwilliam looking at me like I was a piece of trash that needed to be taken out. I had no choice. I went back up to my apartment. I took out my keys, my hand shaking, and unlocked the door. P.506. I stepped inside and locked the deadbolt behind me. The heavy clunk of the bolt sliding into place was the only comforting sound I had heard all day. I didn't turn on the lights. I sat on the couch in the dark watching the city lights flicker to life through my window. I was trapped. I couldn't leave, because Dave was still here somewhere. I couldn't stay, because this place was a predator. My phone sat dark on the coffee table. It didn't ring. Hours passed. My body was exhausted, but my mind was a hornet's nest. Every creak of the building, every distant siren made me jolt. Then I heard it. A soft, steady sound. The sound of running water. It was coming from the bathroom. I froze. I hadn't been in the bathroom since that morning. I was meticulous about turning off faucets, a holdover from a childhood with a frugal father. I knew, with absolute certainty, that the tap was off. I got up from the couch. My legs felt stiff, my movements wooden. I didn't turn on the lamp. I moved through the familiar darkness of my own home, one step, then another. The floorboards didn't make a sound. The sound of water grew louder as I approached the bathroom door. A steady, gentle splashing. My hand closed around the cool brass doorknob. It felt real, solid. I held my breath and turned it. I pushed the door open. Cold, damp air washed over my face. It smelled of mildew and rot and stagnant water. I squinted into the gloom. This was not my bathroom. My bathroom was modern tile and chrome fixtures. This was a nightmare of peeling, yellowed wallpaper, and cracked porcelain. A single bare bulb hung from a frayed wire in the ceiling, casting a weak, jaundiced light. A filthy, rust-stained tub sat against the far wall. The sink was a horror of grime, and from its corroded faucet, a stream of dark-looking water splashed into the basin. There was no window. The mirror over the sink was a spider web of cracks, reflecting back a distorted, dark shape that was me. I slammed the door shut, my heart hammering against my ribs. My back hit the wall in the hallway. I squeezed my eyes shut. No, it was a hallucination. The stress. The fear. That's all it was. I took a deep, shuddering breath. I had to prove it to myself. I reached out again, my hand shaking violently, and grabbed the knob. I threw the door open again. I was looking at my own kitchen, the clean countertops, the stainless steel refrigerator, the microwave with its glowing clock reading 10:47 p.m. It was my kitchen, exactly as it should be, but it was on the other side of my bathroom door. A strangled noise escaped my throat. I slammed the door again. Bang! My mind was screaming. I counted to 3, my teeth gritted. 1, 2, 3. I opened it a third time. I was staring into my own bedroom. My unmade bed. The pile of clothes on the chair. The window looking out onto the glittering, indifferent city. The very room I had left just moments before. The rooms were moving. The apartment was a Rubik's Cube, and something was twisting it, shuffling the pieces. My home was no longer a fixed space. It was a fluid, malicious trap. Escape. The thought was a bolt of lightning. I had to get out. Now. I scrambled away from the shifting door and lunged for the front door, the deadbolt, my only way out. My fingers wrapped around the heavy brass knob of the main entrance. Agony. A searing, white-hot pain shot up my arm. I screamed and snatched my hand back, a sharp hiss of pain escaping my lips. The knob glowed with a faint cherry-red heat, the metal itself radiating waves of warmth. I stared at my palm. A perfect, angry red imprint of the knob was branded into my flesh, already beginning to blister. A sound whispered past my ear. A child's giggle. High-pitched and cruel. Leah's giggle. I spun around. The living room was empty. The sound had been right there, a breath against my skin, but there was nothing. My eyes darted around the room, then to the large picture window. My last link to the world outside. My last hope. It wasn't a window anymore. Where there had been glass and a view of the city skyline, there was now a solid wall of dark red brick and gray mortar. No frame, no sill, no seam where it met the plaster. It was as if the building had healed over its own opening, sealing me inside a brick and plaster tomb. Panic took over. Pure, animal panic. There was no logic left, only the raw instinct to flee, to hide. A door. I had to get through a door, any door. I ran back toward the hallway, toward the door that I knew, just moments ago, led to my bedroom. It was my only landmark, the only space that still felt like mine. I threw myself at it, fumbled with the knob, this one mercifully cool, and burst through. The door clicked shut behind me, a heavy, final sound, a lock engaging. I stumbled to a halt, my breath catching in my throat. I wasn't in my bedroom. I was standing in the middle of a living room, a strange one, a worn floral couch, a dark wood coffee table, a thick, musty smell in the air. This wasn't my furniture. This wasn't my apartment. My eyes scanned the unfamiliar space, landing on the walls. They were covered in framed photographs, family pictures, a smiling couple on a beach, a young boy in a baseball uniform, missing a front tooth, an older version of the same boy, a teenager with awkward hair, standing next to his parents at a graduation. My blood ran cold. I stepped closer to one of the photos. The smiling, teenage boy. I knew that face. I knew that awkward grin. It was Dave. I was in Dave's apartment. The photograph stared at me. Dave's life in neat, wooden frames. I could hear my own breathing, loud and harsh in the dead air of his apartment. The burn on my palm throbbed, a steady, pulsing beat that matched the hammering in my chest. My throat was sandpaper. I needed water. I made a move toward the kitchen, then froze. This wasn't my apartment. This wasn't my kitchen. To walk in there felt like a violation, a deeper trespass than just being here. My only way out was the door I came through, the front door of Dave's apartment. I turned, my feet clumsy on the unfamiliar rug. My hand, the good one, reached for the knob. I hesitated, expecting another searing shock. The metal was cool. I turned it, pulled the door open. It was not the 5th floor. The carpet was a different color, a faded, sickly green. The light fixtures were different, caged yellow bulbs casting long shadows. The hallway smelled of boiled cabbage and dust. I looked at the door I just exited. It had no number, just a blank wooden face. I looked down the hall to my right. It ended in a solid wall 20 feet away. To my left, it stretched, turning a corner in the distance. I had no idea what floor I was on. I didn't know if floor was even the right word anymore. I had to move. Staying here was pointless. I started walking, my steps echoing. My thirst was a physical thing now, a clawing in my throat. My stomach was a tight, empty knot. How long had it been? I glanced at my wrist. My watch was gone. I fumbled in my pocket. My phone wasn't there. I must have dropped it. Back in my apartment. P.506. A place that might not exist anymore. I turned the corner. The new hallway was identical to the last. Same green carpet. Same yellow lights. I picked a door at random. 312. I tried the knob. Locked. I tried the next one. 314. Locked. I walked, trying doors. All locked. I was in a maze of other people's lives, sealed away. Time lost its edges. I walked through hallways that bled into one another. A green carpeted corridor would suddenly become one with worn, red linoleum. The transition seamless. I passed a stretch of wall where the lights were all dead, forcing me to feel my way through the dark, my good hand tracing the bumpy texture of the plaster. I stumbled more than once, my body screaming with fatigue. The skin on my burned palm was tight and weeping. I kept it pressed against my stomach. At some point, I found an open door. It wasn't an apartment. It was a utility closet, smelling of bleach and damp rags. In the corner, a janitor's sink dripped. A slow, steady rhythm. Drip, drip, drip. I lurched toward it, my whole body shaking. I stuck my head under the faucet, not caring about the rust staining the basin, and opened my mouth. The water was metallic and lukewarm, but it was the best thing I had ever tasted. I drank until my stomach hurt, then splashed water on my face, on the back of my neck. I looked at my burned hand. The water made it sting, but it cleaned the grime away, revealing angry, puckered flesh and the beginnings of yellow blisters. I felt a wave of dizziness and leaned against the sink, my forehead cool against the porcelain. I had to keep going. Hiding in a closet was a slow death. I left the closet, closing the door behind me, and faced another anonymous hallway. I walked. I didn't know if it had been hours or days. The constant, low-level electric hum of the building was the only clock I had. Then, I saw a different room. The door was ajar, spilling a pale, flickering light into the hall, not the steady yellow of the corridor bulbs. This was a gray, pulsing light. My feet carried me toward it. I pushed the door open. The room was bare. Completely. No furniture, no pictures, no carpet. Just a stained concrete floor and 4 blank walls. In the center of the room sat a single, old-fashioned television, the boxy kind, with a thick glass screen and knobs instead of buttons. It sat directly on the floor, its power cord snaking to a socket in the wall. The screen was the source of the light, a blizzard of black and white static. The sound was a low, constant shushing. There was nothing else. I stepped inside. The air was cold. The door swung shut behind me with a soft click. I didn't flinch. Locked doors didn't matter anymore. I stared at the screen. The static was hypnotic. I don't know how long I stood there, just watching the chaotic dance of dots. Then, the static resolved. It wasn't a show. It was a video. Grainy, black and white, shot with a handheld camera. The perspective was low, jerky. It was moving down a hallway, one of the building's hallways. I recognized the cheap wood veneer on the doors. The camera panned, and I saw her. Leah. The girl from the picture I found. The neighbor. She was running, scrambling away from the camera. Her face was a mask of terror. Her mouth was open in a scream that the video didn't transmit. She looked back over her shoulder, her eyes wide, pleading. She was looking directly at the person holding the camera. Directly at me. She stumbled, falling against a wall. The camera kept advancing, slow and steady. A predator's pace. She pushed herself up, crab walking backward. "Don't!" Her voice came through the static, distorted and thin. "Please, please stop." She wasn't talking to an empty room. She was begging the person filming her. The camera twitched, a small, almost casual movement. Leah sobbed, a raw, hopeless sound. She pushed herself into a corner, her hands held up as if to ward off a physical blow. The camera moved in closer. Her face filled the entire screen, tears carving paths through the grime on her cheeks. "Why?" she whispered. The camera got so close, her features blurred into a landscape of pure fear. Then the screen went black. Not the black of a television turned off, the black of a lens cap being put on. The set itself was still on, humming. I could feel the electricity in the air. I backed away from it, my legs unsteady. My mind struggled to process what I saw. Not a ghost, a recording, a snuff film, a trophy. The air in front of the television began to shimmer, like heat rising off asphalt. The hum from the set deepened, vibrating through the concrete floor, up my legs. The shimmering coalesced. It took a shape, a human shape. It was her. Leah. She hovered between me and the blank screen. She was translucent, woven from the same gray static as the video. I could see the wall behind her through her body. Her face wasn't the terrified mask from the video. It was an expression of immense, soul-deep pain. Her eyes were fixed on me. They weren't accusing. They were pleading, just as they had been on the screen. She raised an arm. The movement was slow, heavy. Her see-through fingers trembled. She didn't point at me. She pointed past me, toward the wall to my left. The wall with no door. Her mouth opened. Her lips moved, forming silent words. I couldn't hear them. I couldn't read them. Was it a warning? A direction? A trap? Luring me toward the thing that had cornered her, filmed her, killed her? The building using its bait. I stared at her pointing hand, then back at her agonized face. I had two choices. Stay here and die in this empty room, or trust the desperate ghost of a murdered girl. I made my choice. I ran. I charged toward the wall she was pointing at. The instant I moved, the building screamed. It was not a sound I heard with my ears. It was a deep, structural groan that vibrated through my bones. A web of cracks splintered across the plaster in front of me. The hum from the TV behind me swelled into a roar. I didn't stop. I ducked my head and slammed my shoulder into the cracking wall. It gave way with a shower of plaster and splintered lath. I fell through, not into another room but into blackness. I landed hard on the concrete floor, rolling to dissipate the impact. The roar was everywhere now. The floor beneath me shook. I scrambled to my feet. Arms erupted from the walls around me. Not human arms. They were thick, lumpy appendages the color and texture of wet mud. They slithered from fresh cracks in the plaster, grasping, fingers of clay closing on empty air where I had been a second before. I ran. It was a narrow service corridor, pipes snaking along the ceiling. More arms burst from the walls, from the floor. One brushed against my leg, cold and gritty. Another shot from the ceiling, its muddy fingers grazing my hair. The building was alive, and it was furious. It was trying to pull me back, to absorb me into its very structure. A door was ahead, a single, metal fire door. An arm shot out from the floor directly in my path. It wrapped around my ankle. The grip was impossibly strong. It felt like cold, wet cement hardening around my leg. I screamed, a raw sound of pain and effort, and kicked at it with my free foot. I stomped on the wrist. It felt like kicking a bag of wet sand. It didn't let go. It was dragging me down. I threw myself forward, all my weight and momentum pulling against the grip. The arm stretched, thinned. I heard a wet, tearing sound. My skin ripped. A line of fire shot up my leg. But I was free. I lunged the last few feet and slammed into the fire door. The push bar gave way. I tumbled through, falling onto a carpeted floor. The door swung shut behind me. Silence. The shaking stopped. The roaring faded. I was in a normal hallway. The carpet was a neutral beige. The light was a clean, white fluorescent glow. I lay there on the floor, gasping for air, my chest heaving. Plaster dust coated my hair and clothes. My heart felt like it was going to beat its way out of my ribcage. I pushed myself up, my body aching. My gaze fell on my leg. The cuff of my jeans was torn. Underneath, a deep, circular abrasion circled my ankle, raw and bleeding, packed with a dark, clay-like grit. The price of escape. I looked at the door I had just come through. It was just a plain, gray, metal door. No knob on this side. No way back. My eyes tracked down the hallway. I was looking for a sign, any sign of where I was. Then I saw it. Directly across from me. A door. Apartment 404. And she was there. Leah, standing at the threshold, her form more solid now, though still translucent. The pain was gone from her face, replaced by a deep weariness. The door to 404 was slightly ajar, revealing only a slice of perfect, impenetrable black. She looked at me. Held my gaze for a long moment. Then, she gave a single, slow nod. A confirmation. An invitation. Her form dissolved, not vanishing, but breaking apart like a pillar of fine ash caught in a breeze. Gone. I was alone in the hallway, in front of room 404. The final destination she had led me to through the building's fury. This was it, the heart of it all. I took a breath. My body screamed at me to run, to find a window and break it, to scream until my throat bled. But I was done running. I was done being the mouse. I limp-walked across the hall. The blackness inside the open door seemed to drink the light from the hallway. I put my good hand on the door. I pushed it open. I stepped inside. The door closed behind me. It did not click. It made a deep, final thump, the sound of stone settling against stone. The clean fluorescent light of the hallway was gone, total black. And a different kind of silence. The building's electric hum was absent here. The air was heavy, still, and cold. It smelled of wet soil, of broken concrete, of things left to rot in the dark. It felt like being in a crypt. I raised my hand in front of my face. I could not see it. My breath plumed out, visible only in my mind. I had dropped my phone. I remembered dropping it, back when I fell through the wall. A new wave of cold, separate from the room's temperature, washed through me. My only light was gone. I was blind. I took a step forward, my arms outstretched. My sneakers scraped on raw concrete, littered with grit and small pebbles. The sound was horribly loud. I froze, listening. Nothing. I took another step. My hand brushed against a wall. It was not plaster. It was rough, uneven concrete, cold and damp to the touch. A bead of moisture trickled down my fingers. My foot bumped against something. Not a wall. Something lower. I shuffled back, then knelt. My good hand exploring the space in front of me. Piles of rubble. Broken chunks of brick and concrete. My fingers traced the cold, rusted line of an exposed piece of rebar, sticking out of a shattered slab. This was not an apartment. This was never an apartment. This was a wound in the building's foundation. A hollow space, forgotten and sealed away. The place from a news story I'd half remembered. The collapse during construction. They had sealed it off. They had buried it right here, inside the walls. I had to find the door. I stood up, keeping one hand on the rough concrete wall as a guide. I began to shuffle sideways, my feet kicking through loose debris. The scrape, scrape, scrape of my shoes was my only companion. The darkness was a physical presence. It pressed on my eyes. It made my ears strain for any sound, any hint of another presence. Every rustle of my own clothes was a potential threat. How large was this space? I walked. 10 feet. 20. The wall was unrelenting. No seams, no doorknob, no frame. Fear, a low and familiar hum, started to build in my gut. Leah had led me here. The ghost, or the video, or whatever she was. She had pointed me to a wall and I had crashed through it. She had nodded at this door. A trap. The building, or whoever controlled it, had used her image to lead me to the slaughterhouse. My foot hit something soft. I recoiled instantly, my back hitting the wall hard. The impact sent a jolt of pain through my bruised body. I listened. Nothing. Just the echo of my own gasp. I forced myself to crouch again, my heart hammering against my ribs. I reached out, my fingers trembling. I swept them through the grit on the floor. My hand touched fabric. Denim. It was stiff, caked with dirt. I followed it. A pant leg, a shoe, the sole thick with dried mud. I kept going, my hand crawling upward over a lumpen shape. My fingers brushed against something hard and unnervingly smooth. A row of them. I snatched my hand back as if burned. Bones. My stomach turned. I knew, with a certainty that went deeper than thought, what I was touching. A human leg. The air felt thick in my lungs. I scrambled backward, away from it, my good hand pushing me through the debris until my back was against the opposite wall. I sat there, breathing hard, trying to push the tactile memory of those bones from my fingertips. I was in a tomb, and I was not alone. A low scraping sound echoed from the far side of the room. I went rigid. It was not a sound I had made. It was deliberate. Slow. The sound of metal dragging on concrete. I held my breath, straining to hear over the blood pounding in my ears. Scrap. It was closer now. Something was moving in the dark with me. Fuck this. Fuck this. The words were a silent scream in my head. I couldn't stay here. I had to get out. I pushed myself along the wall, trying to be quiet, my bare hand getting scraped raw on the concrete. I had to get back to the wall where the door had been. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I missed it. Scrape. Clink. It was keeping pace with me, on the other side of the blackness. A predator. Circling. I stopped. The scraping stopped. My blood ran cold. It knew. It was listening to me, reacting to me. The cat-and-mouse game wasn't over. It had just entered its final, lightless stage. I stayed motionless for what felt like an hour. My muscles screamed. The cut on my ankle throbbed with a dull, insistent rhythm. Finally, I had to move. I took a single, slow step. From the darkness, a voice. Found you. It was a man's voice, low and calm. A voice I'd heard before, through a door. The friendly voice. I'm your neighbor, Dave. It wasn't Dave. It was the man pretending to be Dave. A beam of light sliced through the darkness. It wasn't aimed at me. It pointed at the floor, illuminating a small circle of debris. I saw the source. A man holding a heavy industrial flashlight. I could only see his boots and the bottom of his jeans. He took a step. The light moved with him. Then, another. He was walking toward the skeleton. The beam moved up, and I saw her. Leah. What was left of her. A skeleton, half buried in rubble, clad in the rotting remains of her clothes. The light glinted off the bleached white of her skull. Next to her lay a decayed leather purse. He nudged it with the toe of his boot. She was the first. The voice said, conversational, like he was discussing the weather. Full of fire, that one. Fought all the way. I prefer that. It's no fun if they just give up. The beam of light swung away from the bones and swept across the room. It moved slowly, methodically. I flattened myself against the wall, trying to will myself into the concrete. The beam crawled closer. 10 feet away. 5. It touched my shoe. It stopped. The beam traveled slowly up my body. My torn jeans. My dirty shirt. It rested on my face. I squeezed my eyes shut against the blinding glare. There you are, he said. The calm was gone. There was a sickening excitement in his voice now, the thrill of the cornered animal. I was beginning to think you'd gotten lost. I had to break out the old recordings to guide you to the right place. Glad to see it still works. I opened my eyes. I could see his shape behind the light. A big man. Solid. He took another step closer. I could hear his breathing. Steady. Unhurried. Why? The word tore from my throat, a dry rasp. He laughed. A short, ugly sound. Why does a spider build a web? This building. It's a beautiful machine. My machine. People come. People disappear. Nobody looks too hard. Another lonely soul in a big city. But you were different. You started looking. You started knocking on doors. You ruined the peace. The ground beneath my feet trembled. It started as a low vibration, a hum that grew into a deep, grinding roar. It wasn't an earthquake. It was mechanical. The sound of immense hidden engines churning to life somewhere below us. Dust rained down from the ceiling. The beam of light on my face flicked off. We were plunged back into absolute darkness. But the roaring was everywhere. Time for the final step, he shouted over the noise. The reclamation. A section of the wall to my left, the one I had been leaning against, groaned. I threw myself to the side, landing hard on the rubble, as a huge slab of concrete began to move inward. The roar intensified. This wasn't a room, it was a compactor. A jaw of concrete and steel. I scrambled to my feet, disoriented in the roaring dark. I ran, my arms out, and slammed into the opposite wall. It was moving too. The space was shrinking. I was trapped between two grinding walls of solid rock. A thick, wet slurry began to pour from grates in the floor. It was cold, and it smelled of chemicals and wet cement. It was ankle-deep in seconds. I stumbled, the thick liquid sucking at my feet. The man's laughter echoed in the crushing space, mingling with the grinding of the machinery. He wasn't in the compactor with me. He was outside, watching. I screamed. A raw, animal sound of pure terror. The moving wall was only a few feet away. The slurry was at my knees, heavy and cold. It was like trying to run through hardening cement. I saw something in the gray sludge. A wallet, swollen with moisture, floating past me. A single woman's shoe. Trophies. Pieces of the others. I faced the wall coming for me. I braced my hands against its rough, vibrating surface, pushing with all my strength. It was useless. Like a fly trying to stop a truck. The pressure increased. The slurry was at my waist. I heard a sharp crack from my ribs, and a white-hot spear of pain shot through my chest. I cried out, my breath catching in my throat. The slurry rose higher. It was thick, gritty. It climbed my chest, the weight of it making it hard to breathe. The wall was inches from my face. The roaring of the machinery was the only thing in the world. It reached my chin. I tilted my head back, fighting for one last breath of dusty air. The concrete slurry filled my mouth, a foul, gritty tide. It filled my nose. I could not see. I could not scream. I could only feel the immense, impartial pressure and the cold weight of the slurry filling my lungs. My consciousness did not fade. It was extinguished. Snapped off like a light switch. There was grinding, pressure, pain, and then there was nothing. 6 months. The cardboard box scraped against the laminate floor. It made a sound like tearing fabric. I nudged it the last few inches with my sneaker. Dust motes danced in the slanted afternoon light cutting through the grime on the windows. The air was stale, thick with the smell of old carpets and other people's lives. We'd propped the front door open with a brick, but it didn't help. The apartment held its breath. Jack dropped a duffel bag on the bare mattress in the corner. It landed with a soft, heavy whump. He wiped a hand across his forehead, smearing sweat and city dust. Jesus! You'd think the guy would have taken more of his stuff, he said. His voice echoed a little in the empty living room. He was right. A particle-board coffee table stood in the middle of the room, one corner peeling. A faded gray armchair sat against the far wall. In the small kitchen alcove, a set of chipped ceramic mugs still hung on hooks under the cabinets. It wasn't just a few forgotten items. It was almost a whole life, left behind. The landlord had told us the previous tenant left in a hurry. A family emergency, he'd said. Maybe he broke his lease. Ran out of money, I said, tugging at the packing tape on the box. My fingernail bent backward. I hissed and stuck the finger in my mouth. The tape was stronger than it looked. It works for us. We don't have to buy a coffee table. Or mugs, Jack said. He walked into the kitchen and tapped one of the ceramic cups with his knuckle. It made a dull clinking sound. I'm gonna wash these. You want some water? Yes, please. I found my box cutter and sliced through the tape. Inside were books. My books. The familiar smell of paper and ink was a small comfort. It was the first thing that smelled like us in this place. I started stacking them on the floor, making a neat pile against the wall. The building was quiet. I could hear the low hum of the refrigerator Jack had just plugged in. The faint, distant wail of a siren from a street far below. The sounds of the city, muted through layers of brick and glass. We worked for hours. The sun sank lower, and the light in the apartment turned from yellow to a deep, bruised orange. We didn't talk much. Just the sounds of our work. The groan of the mattress as we flipped it. The heavy thud of boxes being set down. The crinkle of packing paper. We ordered pizza. We sat on the floor and ate it out of the box, our backs against the wall. The cheese was greasy, the crust was tough. It was the best meal I'd ever had. Home sweet home, Jack said, leaning his head back. It's a start, I replied. I felt a real smile for the first time all day. It was ours. This box, with its ugly armchair and its strange leftover mugs. It was our box. Later, after Jack had fallen asleep on the mattress amidst a sea of half-unpacked clothes, I was still up. I couldn't shut my brain off. I was arranging spices in the kitchen cabinet. Cumin, paprika, oregano, putting my own small order onto the chaos. The refrigerator hummed its steady, one-note song. I could hear the faint sound of a television from the apartment below us. A murmur of voices and fake laughter. Normal sounds. That's when I heard the knock. It wasn't loud, just a soft, hesitant tapping. Tap, tap, tap. I froze. My hand hovered over the jar of bay leaves. Jack was a heavy sleeper. He hadn't moved. The TV downstairs was still murmuring. Maybe I'd imagined it. Tap, tap, tap. It was real. On our front door. It was almost 11 at night. Who would be knocking? I put the spice jar down on the counter. The small clink of glass on laminate was loud in the quiet room. I walked out of the kitchen. The living room was dark, lit only by the orange glow of a streetlight outside the window. I could see Jack's silhouette on the mattress, a still lump under a sheet. I moved to the door. My bare feet made no sound on the floor. I didn't turn on a light. I leaned forward, my eye pressed to the peephole. The fisheye lens distorted the hallway. The walls curved. The single bare bulb in the ceiling fixture cast a sickly yellow light. A man stood there. He was my age, maybe a few years older. His hair was dark and a little too long. His face was pale, his shoulders hunched slightly inside a plain gray shirt. He wasn't looking at the door, he was looking down at his shoes. He seemed shy. I hesitated. My fingers rested on the chain lock. It felt cold. It was probably just a neighbor. Maybe we were making too much noise. But it was late. He looked up, as if he could feel me watching him. He looked directly at the peephole. A small, polite smile touched his lips. It didn't quite reach his eyes. My social conditioning won. My hand moved from the chain to the deadbolt. It was stupid. I knew it was stupid. But he looked harmless. I turned the lock. The click was loud. I opened the door a few inches, leaving the chain on. "Hello?" My voice was a whisper. "Hi," he said. His voice was quiet, calm. "Sorry to bother you so late. I saw the lights on. I'm your neighbor." His smile widened a fraction. It was a practiced, pleasant shape. But his eyes were flat. They just looked. They didn't seem to hold any light. "Oh, hi," I said, my grip tightening on the edge of the door. The chain felt thin and useless. "We just moved in today." "I know. I saw the truck." He lifted a hand. He was holding something. A small box wrapped in simple brown paper and tied with twine. "I just wanted to say welcome. I brought you a little something. A housewarming gift." This was what normal people did. Normal neighbors. I was being paranoid. I unhooked the chain. I opened the door wider. "That's really nice of you," I said. "You didn't have to do that." "It's nothing." I reached out and took the small box. The paper was rough, like a grocery bag. The box itself was light. "I'm Chloe," I said, trying to fill the silence. "My husband, Jack, is asleep." "Nice to meet you, Chloe." The silence stretched. He didn't offer his name. He just stood there, in the yellow hallway light, looking at me with that same, fixed smile. I should have asked him his name. I should have asked which apartment was his. But the questions got stuck in my throat. There was something about the way he stood there, perfectly still. I shifted my weight. "Well, thank you. This is very thoughtful." He nodded slowly. His gaze drifted past my shoulder, into the dark apartment behind me. His eyes moved, scanning the room. They settled on the kitchen alcove, where the light was still on. "You have a cozy place," he said. His voice was still quiet, but the tone was different. It wasn't a pleasantry anymore. It was an observation, a statement of fact. That kitchen nook, especially, it gets good light in the morning. A block of ice formed in my stomach. From the doorway he could not see the kitchen nook. Not really. He could see a slice of the counter, the edge of the refrigerator. Not the corner where the window was. Not the corner where I had just been arranging my spices. He couldn't know about the morning light. My mouth went dry. I looked from his flat, unblinking eyes back to the box in my hands. The rough paper suddenly felt dirty. "Thank you," I managed to say. The words felt like sand in my mouth. My polite autopilot took over. Would you like to come in?" The smile on his face didn't change, but it felt sharper now. He gave a small shake of his head. "I should let you get back to your unpacking. Another time, maybe." He took a half step back. "My name is Alex, by the way," he said. He turned. He didn't walk toward the elevators, or toward the apartment on the other side. He turned and walked down the hall, in the other direction, toward the stairwell at the far end. His footsteps made no sound. The dim, yellow light seemed to get swallowed by the gray of his shirt. He didn't just walk away. He receded. He faded into the murky darkness of the corridor until he was just a shape, and then he was gone. I stood there for a full minute, my bare feet cold on the floor. I was listening. I heard nothing, no sound of a door opening or closing. Nothing. I closed my door. I slid the deadbolt home. I fastened the chain. My hands were shaking. I looked down at the small, brown-wrapped box in my hands. It felt heavy now. It felt wrong. I walked into the kitchen and set it on the counter, as far away from me as possible. I looked at my neat row of spices. Cumin. Paprika. Oregano. He couldn't have seen this corner. He shouldn't have known. A low, grinding noise echoed from somewhere deep inside the walls of the building. It sounded like stone shifting against stone. It lasted only a second, and then it was gone. The only sound left was the steady, mechanical hum of the refrigerator, and the blood pounding in my ears. The cycle had begun again.